Well, for the next few weeks, we're going to look back to the story of David, King David, through the book of 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel in these next few weeks before we reach our holiday period. And so we are on this week, chapter 25. It's the story of David as he's in the desert, keeping out of the way of King Saul and his army, who's trying to kill him, and he's existing with his group of men in the wilderness, we might say, and surviving there. But the chapter starts off with the death of Samuel. Samuel has been prophet of Israel for 4 decades. A prophet that's been respected, a prophet that's been looked up to by all the people. And he's done his best to keep King Saul on track, but that hasn't worked out. And so he's prepared David for his kingship. And I would imagine that David kept in touch with Samuel for many years, even though the scriptures don't record that. And then we come to this incident with Abigail. And it's a lovely story, like many stories in the Old Testament, that seems quite benign in many respects, I suppose, but has got much to teach us in this simple story of Abigail and her husband Nabal. And I was looking around of how I could illustrate this, because it's quite a long passage in Scripture, and I found a play, I suppose you might call it, a bit of a drama by a church from America who put this up on YouTube, and I think it's quite good. So we've got the story of David and Abigail, and through this story we can see that there are various things that God, through his word to us, which we'd say we need to learn. And we see here that David discovers that patience and restraint are the best path in God's plan for us. The scriptures announce that Nabal, this man that we're all looking at here, and his wife Abigail, Nabal was very rich and lived in Maon. He owned 3,000 sheep, 1,000 goats, which he kept at Carmel. His wife Abigail was sensible and beautiful, but he was from the Caleb clan and was rough and mean. It's a nice description, isn't it? Rough and mean. Lovely painting by Rubens of the scene of Abigail when she hears that her stupid husband had refused David supplies, that she rushes out knowing that David would return to their home and their estate and take what he believed was rightly his. Now, when we look at this story, David's request for food, for supplies, is not unreasonable. It was part of the landscape and the culture of the Israelites at the time. You see, in reality, who should be protecting Nabal's land and his animals, his flocks, his sheep, his people? It should have been King Saul. What was King Saul doing? Was he protecting his land? Was he protecting his people? No. He was too busy trying to hunt down David and kill him because of his jealousy and his rage, and because he knew that God had taken away his right to rule Israel. And so David, in his wanderings around Israel, is also protecting the people, protecting the farms and the land and the estates of the Israelites. And Nabal is what we could describe a large landowner, a very rich, would have had a large amount of land, and his land would have been open to bandits and incursions from the Philistines and the Amorites and one or two other people. And really he shows contempt when David's men show up asking for a few supplies. And he even made things worse by suggesting that he hadn't got any idea who David was. Now that's very unlikely that Nabal wouldn't know the situation that was going in the nation. He was a clan leader, the scriptures tell us here, and he would have been aware of what was going on. That David looked like he was the king in waiting, and he would know that Saul's kingdom was falling apart. He was unable to govern it. So he was insulting David's troops who he sent quite badly. Abigail's reaction, of course, is commendable. She knew that her husband should have supplied David with food. After all, David had probably saved him lots and lots of money by protecting his lands, even his servants we saw there in that great clip there were speaking up for David and saying, look, we haven't lost anything this year while David's been out there, and surely that would have been right. But we know that Nabal's organising a big banquet at the time, really wanting to enjoy the fruits of the harvest with his neighbours and proclaim his wealth to all his friends and clan leaders. And so Abigail missed that, but she heard from her servants what had happened, and she knew immediately that if she didn't act and take supplies to David, then there could have been a catastrophic reaction by David towards not only her husband, but towards everybody else who worked on that estate. She realised and obviously knew that David was the appointed king and would at some stage rule the land. She was obviously a believer and a very wise woman too. And so she has no hesitation in gathering the servants around to pick up a good load of supplies and get off quickly to David's camp before he could organise a raid on her home. Abigail, we see, discerns the importance to David that as the legitimate, anointed, waiting king of Israel, he must continue to live in faith and wait patiently for God's purposes to work out. She understood the dynamics of this. David had done pretty well up into this staging. He had many opportunities. We read in the chapters before this, of killing King Saul quite easily. Although Saul was out hunting for him, David was able to get close to Saul to kill him. But he felt that wouldn't be right. He had to wait patiently for the Lord's timing. And he coped with that well. But of course, as time went on, I suspect like all of us, that became a really bit of a stress in his life, and he needed to keep close to God. And so Abigail, at this vital time, comes into the picture to stop David acting hastily and doing something he would later regret that would harm his kingship. And so as Abigail meets David, offers him the food and offers him words of wisdom, which must have been very courageous for her to say to David, well, you know, if you lose your temper over this and come into our estate and murder a few people or murder Nabal, that will be on your conscience and it would harm your kingship. And David recognises her words of wisdom and takes no action, accepts the gifts, stands his men down and praises Abigail for having the forethought to come out and stop him. So we see here in this simple story that I think the scriptures are teaching us all that we need to be patient and teachable. And this is what's happened. David is being patient and he's still being teachable. Though he's a big man, he knows he's in God's will, he still needs to be teachable. And that's what we need to discover as well. And there is a sense when things are not going right in our lives, that we need to take a long-term view of life. Isn't it? It's so difficult to take a long-term view when things are not going well. We all want quick answers. And I think that's the very sorry thing that's happening around Grenfell Tower at the moment, isn't it? People want instant answers. And if they got instant answers, I'm pretty confident that no matter how hard the people work, they won't get good answers. Because that investigation and everything is going to take time. But people don't see that, do they? They want instant things. They want to be instantly rehoused. I mean, that's a task in itself. These things just... We don't have hundreds of houses, flats, homes available, do we, in this country? Otherwise, there would be loads of people in temporary accommodation now. And yet, to these people who've been hurt terribly, they want instant things done for them. And the reality is it doesn't work that way. They need to take a long-term plan and be patient. Now, I know that's difficult, and I'm not criticising them for it, but you know what I mean. So, patience and teachability are the two things we're going to look at this morning. Here comes one of my wonderful definitions, just so we know where we are, of patience. The quality of forbearance and self-control which shows itself particularly in a willingness to wait upon God and his will. Believers are called upon to be patient in their expectations of God's actions and in their relationships with one another. And of course we are reminded that patience is a fruit of the Spirit, which we looked at in detail earlier on in the year. As this story plays out, we see in that sense that David perhaps is becoming a little bit impatient and needs to be slowed down. Otherwise, he could lose his anointing. And we all need to learn that. Being patient and teachable is part of us becoming disciples. The text gives a glimpse of David being patient and becoming the ideal king. He's struggling in his exile, and it would have been easy for him to lose it, moving from place to place, keeping ahead of King Saul, and increasingly getting provisions for his troops, because his army, which is obviously going to be important to him in the thing, is gradually growing at this time whilst he's on the run from Saul. He's picking up men that will support him when he becomes king, and which he will need. He will need a secure army, and of course the more he had, the more difficulty it was becoming to defeat them. And of course that's part of the growing learning experience of being a good king, isn't it? And of course, as he waits patiently for God to act, he comes across Nabal and Abigail. He is patient, he is willing to learn, and his patience rewards him, because Nabal has overdone his celebration by the sound of it, and he dies. And he dies, we presume, of a heart attack. And not only does that take Nabal out of the picture, but Abigail turns out to be a lovely lady. And David falls in love with her and marries her. And that's handy because King Saul has dissolved his marriage to Michal. He's given, as David's been on the run, King Saul's giving Michal, David's wife, over to someone else, as a king can do. But as David hears that Nabal has died, he praises him and says, "He has judged Nabal guilty for insulting me. The Lord kept me from doing anything wrong, and he made sure that Nabal hurt only himself with his own evil." And therefore he wins all things. So I'd imagine that as he marries Abigail, David also becomes owner of Nabal's estate and has got a ready supply of food and everything for his growing army, which works out very nice, doesn't it? But we all need patience. It's one of the fruits of the Spirit, we know, and it's one of those things that we all struggle with, isn't it? Trying to be patient when we all want to get on life. And of course, I think in this day and age, being patient is more difficult than ever when we live in our instant society, isn't it? Where we can see something, order it online, and it arrives the next day. And sometimes we get so used to that, it's getting difficult when we have to wait for things. It is a problem because we can get so used to the way the world operates these days. But let's see a nice quote from one of my favourite people. "Nothing great is ever accomplished without patience, because in order to be successful, your dreams must be translated into work. The people who succeed in life are the people who are willing to do what they don't feel like doing. They are not mastered by their moods, they are mastered by the Master. And they establish their goals and plans according to God's will. I think we would all recognise that, isn't it? In the sense that patience is one of those things we need in order that we can accomplish what we need to accomplish, no matter if that is in our work life, our family life, or even in church life. There's something good about being patient. But of course, in the many sense, we also need to remain teachable. We mean open to learn things. There's another one of my Christian definitions. The common teachability of children is celebrated throughout Scripture, whereas their occasional rebellion is deplored. Jesus called a child to stand among them to illustrate teachability. This teachable spirit was among the qualities for which Jesus praised children, welcomed them, and likened the kingdom to them. A child's teachable attitude is a model for Christian life. A child's teachable attitude is a model for Christian life. And I would go further than that and say all of us need a teachable attitude, and it doesn't make sense not to keep on learning. I know I resented that, I think, a bit through my adult life. It's the sort of thing when you're at work and you keep on having to going on courses. Any of you feel that that happens to you? It did happen to me in both my jobs I've had, that constantly going courses. But of course you realise that you need to be up to date in things. Things are changing and we need to keep up to date. Even now, things I need to learn, I still need, in what I'm doing now, to put words on top of the video. It's fiddly. It takes patience. And I have to learn that. I have to read all about how to do it. And I still need to learn what God is saying through His Scriptures today. I know I've been doing this job for many years. I still need to do research and learn. It's something we all need to do. We need to learn as we go along. It's not something we can just ditch. Patience and teachability then is a great example in this simple story in the Old Testament. And the Bible reminds us that many of the great people of the Bible needed to be teachable throughout their lives. Look at the story of Abraham, we see. He needed to keep on learning, to know God's will for his life and plans for the nation that was being created through his family. He needed to be open and teachable all his life, and that applies to us. So I wondered how to illustrate this in a modern way today. So I thought we had a look at this at church, but I mentioned it, but this is a great film, The Good Lie. And I'm going to do some more teaching on this in the summer, when we're even a bit more relaxed than we are now. But this is the story of some refugees from Somalia, a family that were displaced because rebels came into their village and killed their parents. 6 children set off across the desert of East Africa to find refuge in a camp away from the fighting. They eventually arrive in northern Kenya. And it's the story of them being patient and teachable, and gradually seeing great Christian faith of these kids, as their faith and their trust in God work out and through the difficulties of a modern life, in the camps for many years, and then they go to America, and then they find out that, in the sense that to get jobs they have to lie, and that's what it's all about and how they cope with that. But this is a story of one of the young men who's training to be a doctor. Doctors that know it all, because the background to that story, of course, is that the doctor had been looking at those patients for several days, and he missed that problem with that girl's stomach, or skin disease, whatever it was. He missed that, and the young man comes along, who's training to be a doctor, and is going along on the doctor's rounds, and he picks it up. Many doctors would have resented that, but that doctor recognises that he did well by pointing it out, was brave. Great film. Pick it up, it's available on DVD. So we see in life, really, no matter how well we've done, how high we get in our employment or situation or in our community, we still need to be teachable. With teachability comes flexibility, and with flexibility comes the ability to stop being marred to methods instead of being marred to biblical values. You know, we need to be teachable to what's going on in life, no matter who we are. No matter how high up we are in our particular work or profession or community standing, we always need to be teachable. Otherwise, mistakes and disasters are more likely to happen because we get overconfident with what's going on in our lives. And I dare say that was part of the problem with the situation at Grenfell Tower. People got overconfident that they could just do this, change this, and not stick to what is good. We could even say, with all the political mess that's going on, the same thing at this particular time. So no matter how high we are in our profession or whatever we're doing, doesn't matter how well we think we're doing as a mother or a father or a grandfather or grandmother, in that sense within our family life, we all need to be open and teachable and patient to what's going on around us. So out of this simple story, we see that the scriptures are very practical for us to learn to today. The story may be 2,000 years old, but it's still relevant for us today. Next week then, we're going to look on as David becomes king, and the theme will be the faithfulness of David.